Hello students, welcome to lecture 1.2, Ancient History and Civilization of Africa. In this lecture, I will talk about first the early human beings which emerged in Africa, and then I will talk about the ancient African civilizations. First, with regard to the early human beings, most scientists now agree that the early human beings originated in Africa, especially from a zone of savanna in eastern and southern Africa, before they spread all over the world, starting from 200,000 or 100,000 before Christ. And that is known as the Out of Africa model. These early human beings were generally classified in different groups, but the most important groups were the Homo habilis, the handyman using stone tools, who emerged around 2.5 million years ago, and then we have the group known as the Homo erectus, erectus meaning standing upright, which emerged about 1.6 million years ago, and finally the group that all of us belong to, that is the group of Homo sapiens or modern men. This group emerged, like I said earlier, around 200,000 to 100,000 years ago, and those are the ones who spread all over the world. This figure shows us the so-called Turkana boy. This was a Homo erectus, a young man who lived around 1.6 to 1.5 million years ago in East Africa. The early human beings were hunters and gatherers, and they did that for millions of years. They used also stone tools. They had to travel from place to place in search of food. However, the invention of agriculture around 10,000 before Christ led to the permanent settlement in villages and even in cities. And it was from those cities that the early civilization emerged. Concerning the early civilization, first let's define what is civilization. A civilization can be defined as an advanced stage of human culture in which there are advanced economy, which means that people who have civilization no longer are doing hunting and gathering, but they are practicing agriculture and trade. In civilization also you have advanced social and political organization, which means they are living in a kingdom or empire as opposed to just living in tribes or family. And then the last element of civilization is the existence of art and science, which require the existence of a writing system. So those are the elements of a civilization, and all of those elements existed at the same time at two different places. Those are Mesopotamia, which is in the Middle East, and Egypt, which is in Africa around 3000 BC. It's worth noting that there is still a debate among historians concerning the origins of Egyptians. This debate is opposing the so-called Afrocentrists against those who are known as traditionalists. And the debate is just about the origins of the Egyptians, whether they were from Africa, which means totally African, or they are from the Middle East, which means that they are not from Africa. So that's a debate that is still going on, but this debate is now are no longer relevant when we find out that there's another civilization in Africa, which is the Nubian civilization, and we will talk about the Nubian civilization in the next slides. But coming back to the Egyptians, Egypt was known as the gift of the Nile. What does that mean? That means that if there was not a Nile River, Egypt would not have existed. And this is easy to understand because the place was a desert, and if you don't have water, then people would not have been able to live there and create a civilization. And this is why Egypt was called the gift of the Nile. Egypt was unified around 3150 BC by the early kings who are known as the pharaohs. These kings expanded the kingdom beyond the Nile River. They also achieved great works such as pyramids and palaces, and we will see the picture of those pyramids in the next slides. The Egyptians also developed art and science and technology, so they really have a civilization that is based on the writing system known as hieroglyphics. The Egyptians also worshipped many gods and goddesses, so they were polytheists. The most famous among these gods and goddesses were Ra or Re. Other was known as Isis, Osiris, Anubis. So those are the gods and goddesses of the Egyptians. So this picture shows us the pyramids of Gizeh, and these are the greatest achievements of the Egyptians. Next to the Egyptian civilization in the south, along the Nile River, there was another civilization, another African civilization, which also emerged around 3000 BC, and that was the Nubian civilization. The Nubians interacted with the Egyptians. They also were dominated by the Egyptians around 1000 BC, but then after 850 BC, they defeated the Egyptians, so they ruled the Egyptians. The most important thing about the Nubians is that they had a similar civilization to that of the Egyptians. So this picture shows us the Nubian pyramids, which is one part of the civilization. As you can see, these pyramids are very similar to the Egyptian pyramids. So that concludes lecture 1.2. Please move to lecture 1.3 to continue module 1.